Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Monkey Wrench. I'm Kelly, the monkey with the wrench. If you're watching this, you're watching it on Patreon, because I'm trying to come up with different things to post for my Patreon members than just fixing lawnmowers and jet skis and whatnot. So I actually do have a life outside of fixing machines. I'm here in Titusville at Cape Canaveral in Florida, and right over there, which you probably can't see too well, let me see if I can zoom in. Right there in the center of the screen, if I can stop it from shaking, you see those three little towers right in the center of your screen. That is today's rocket launch, and it is scheduled for sometime in the next few hours. There's actually supposed to be 2 rocket launches tonight, which has never happened in the history of SpaceX. One around 5 o'clock and one around 7 o'clock, and they're both coming from right here on my direct horizon. So depending on what the lighting situation is, if it rains or not, whether they get scrubbed, I should be able to get at least a rocket launch to put on this video. So I just want to say thanks to all my Patreon subscribers for helping me keep my channel alive. Thank you to all the new subscribers that will eventually see this on YouTube. Thankfully, all this cost me with some gas, and it's starting to get busy out here. So apparently we're in the best spot we can get to see this rocket launch. So hopefully we see 2 tonight. It'll be historic. Alright guys, welcome back to my channel, Monkey Wrench. I'm Kelly, the monkey with the wrench. This will be the 3rd video in this series on the $75 zero turn. That's a Toro Timecutter that I bought, and the engine was locked up. So in the first video, we checked it out, we put a starter on it, we found out it was locked up. I believe in the second video we freed everything up and got everything cleaned up. So I've got everything cleaned up. We've got full range of motion back in the machine. I've got the heads cleaned up, the other head's over there. I picked up the head gaskets and all the other gaskets I need, and in this one we're going to put this thing back together, and we're going to strap it back onto the zero turn, and we're going to fire it up and see what happens. So if you missed those videos, check those videos out for full explainers. Otherwise, let's start putting this thing back together the down and dirty way. Alright, I don't know how much of this you'll see, how much you won't see, how much I care to show, that kind of thing. But we got our push rods back here. We got our new gasket set, and for some reason this gasket set came with 1 head gasket and 2 of everything else. So 2 exhaust gaskets, 2 intake gaskets, and on this particular machine, there's your part number. These are genuine kohler parts, 3284102-S, and it comes with 1 head gasket, which is kind of ridiculous that it has 1 head gasket, and then it has 2 intake, 2 exhaust, blah blah blah. So there it is. Now on these head gaskets, sometimes it says top. This has T's on it, the letter T for turtle or top, and this line would go down against the face here. So I'm going to put that on the top just like that, and then we're going to take our cylinder head, and there are little nipples that stick out here so that the gasket will sit on it and that the cylinder head will line up correctly. Now before I bolt that down, I'm just going to take my push rods and I'm going to put them in place. There's a little tiny wear mark on there which rides right here on this plate, so I know which end went into the machine before. So I'm going to kind of put them back exactly where I took them out, if I can get them in there with these stupid rocker arms in the way. This is always fun. Once you get them in there, you'll know And you'll be able to look on the push rod as well to see that that little wear spot is sitting right where it's supposed to. And I just wanted to make sure that they were going to fit in there correctly. I'm not locking them down or tightening them down yet. I'm just making sure that they're sat down there in the tappets where they're supposed to. And that when I bring my rocker arms back, that they will sit where they're supposed to. And again, I've got to set the valves afterwards, but now they're just kind of in place. I know my head's in place. My head is all the way down, and I'm going to find my head bolts on this machine. They were all the same. I hear it in the comments already. You're supposed to put Loctite on those. I don't put Loctite on stuff unless it loosens up and becomes a problem, because Loctite makes it harder for the next guy to pull it apart. It'll be a waste of Loctite if the repair on this does not go well. If you watched the last video in this series, I did not hone the cylinder out with a proper hone. I wanted to show you guys old school what it was like 40 years ago when I was a kid and all we had was sandpaper and a desire to get a few more hours out of something that we had. So I used 600 grit sandpaper to clean out that cylinder sleeve, and we're going to see if it was successful. It was obviously successful enough to give us our full range of our machine back, but you're going to see firsthand whether it can be done, whether it should be done, and what happens when you do it. Because like I said in the last video, I already have a replacement motor for this. I have motors laying around. One of the good things about being a shop, so to speak, is that I have motors laying around. Obviously you might not, and you might want to know if you can do this kind of a repair without having to go out and buy specialty tools and all that kind of stuff. Could you do it with just sandpaper? So I don't care if this thing blows up. I'm not real concerned about any portion of it. Let me get an extension. When I cleaned everything up, one of the valves was sticking just a little bit, and I thought about pulling it apart and giving it a valve job, and I thought, you know what? It seems to be clear. I tried twisting said valve with my fingers, and it did not twist. There was no movement, and yet there was free movement in and out. So I decided I was going to put this thing back together just the way it is and see what happens. I've also been asked several times, you should be torquing that down, or what's the torque specs? And if you know me, you know that I own a torque wrench and I don't use it unless I need leverage to get something off. I'm not big on torque specs on lawnmowers and all that kind of crap. If you want to do that, that is absolutely fine. Come on, guys. But I am not real concerned about torque. As you can see, I'm kind of holding things, doing a cross pattern on there and bringing it down to tight. I've done this enough. I know right about where it's supposed to be, and I'm okay with that on this disposable motor. I know it's gonna hold. I'm not worried about it. That's my point. So now I just want to turn this and make sure both valves are working the way they're supposed to. Aha. And even though that I have not set the valve lash yet, which I will do last, both of my valves are working correctly. One in, one out, one in, one out. All right, so I'm gonna bring that back down for the moment. I'm gonna go onto the other side. I'm gonna put the other head gasket in. As far as valve cover gaskets go, this is a metal valve cover. So all we're gonna do is put some, yeah, I'm having a complete brain fart. We're gonna put some gasket sealer around that when we're ready to do it. I may be pulling this whole thing apart and honing that cylinder and putting bigger rings in it. I have no idea. But like I said, I get motors all the time. I already have a replacement for this that cost me 20 bucks that I can easily strap onto this machine that is in running condition. And I'm just not too worried about it. So I'm not going to bother to do a whole lot. We cleared out the cylinder. I'm putting some new head gaskets in it only because I took them apart and the old ones obviously were shot. But otherwise, we're putting this thing back together. What I'm going to be doing with this machine is I'm going to be using it to cut grass. I have a couple other zero turns which you've seen on the channel, and one of them that I completely rebuilt the engine on is a commercial Gravely, and I have a buyer for that, and I've been cutting grass with that myself for the last year and a half. But it's only a 34-inch deck, and I don't really need it. I thought I might need it to get in people's backyard. Didn't have big gates, and I rarely use the thing. So after using it for a year and a half to cut several lawns a week, I know that it's in good shape because I rebuilt the motor without a torque wrench. By the way, go back and watch the video. I didn't pick up a torque wrench at all. And I've probably put another couple hundred hours on it since I rebuilt it without a single problem. The wobble, the crankshaft had a wobble to it, and I had to pull the entire motor apart so that I could put a new sleeve in. So now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And get my push rods. And again, these are not the big hollow ones like that are in the Briggs and Strattons that are as big as my pinky. These are all solid rods. They're the same. I've already checked them. They're not bent, they're not broken, they're not cracked. So on the Briggs, one would be a brushed aluminum and one would be a copper color. The darker color is a harder material and it's for the exhaust. But on these, they're both identical. So I could just go ahead and put this back together. Now it looks like you're going to be missing some of this because my little buddy over there is autistic and he's very vocal. So I'm not going to film too much while he's out here playing. He's a lovely kid. But if he's vocal today, I'm not going to film too much. Come on now. The reason that I put them in before I crank down on this is because now with the push rods in place, there'll be a little bit of space there, but it gave me the ability to lift it up. And now when I torque those down, everything will be in place. I will again loosen these and put the proper lash, but I like to know that things go back the way they came apart. Before I change the settings. And the truth is that this thing just sat, didn't break, there was no issue with it, it just sat. Maybe the carburetor's dirty or something, I haven't gotten that far yet, but it did just sit, and it got water, probably through condensation, into the piston sleeve, and it corroded it, and that was why we had to take these apart. So the settings might be okay, is my point. According to the specs, I looked it up, the intake is supposed to be at 5,000, and the exhaust is supposed to be at 7. If you're hearing that, it was tapping while I was turning because it was hitting here. I have this on a pretty low setting, so I'm not too worried about doing that either. And my little buddy went inside, so I'm just gonna keep going. This is a pretty easy situation. We didn't take much off, so we don't have to put much on. That's the heads back on in place. The push rods back in where they're supposed to be. I didn't undo these, so I will get the feelers gauge and check the clearance. But here in a second, I'm again going to spin the motor and make sure that both valves on this side work. We know the ones on that side work, so do the ones on this side work. There's one. There's one over here moving the way it's supposed to. Now that one over there is moving. Now that one over here is moving. So it looks like all 4 of our valves are working correctly, or as correctly as need to be. Now I'm going to make a separate video on getting the feelers gauges and adjusting these. I've done it on other videos. I'm not going to put you through that on this one. After I adjust those valves, all I've got to do is put all my tins back on, put my muffler back on, put my intake and my carburetor back on, and all that good stuff. So you're going to see most of that, but I'm not going to worry about showing you the valve adjustment. I am going to make a separate video out of that though, so it'll be much shorter. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Monkey Wrench. I'm Kelly, the monkey with the wrench. Today is going to be a shorter video. This is part of a series that I'm doing on the rebuild of this particular 22 horsepower Kohler that came off of that $75 zero turn. If you want to see the video on how we rebuilt all the stuff we've done, go and check that out. This is specifically going to be on setting the valves on your machine. Because I had the heads off, I have to check my valves, so I don't worry about top dead center. I spin the valves until one is down. If it's in the down position, then there's no pressure on this one. And in this particular one, our valves are supposed to be, this is our intake, and it's supposed to be at 7 thousandths, and it's way loose. So I've got a T20 bit here and a 1/2 inch wrench. I'm going to hold the collar with the 1/2 inch wrench and not let it move. I'm going to loosen the T20 inside. I'm going to give that about a full turn. And then I'm going to take my 7 thousandths And I'm just going to turn the whole collar until that gets tight. Not completely tight. There needs to be just a little bit of movement, and I should be able to let go of my feelers gauge and they stay where they are. That means that I have just a little bit of drag, and that's what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to put my 1/2 inch wrench back on the collar, being very careful not to move it. And I'm going to tighten up the star on the inside. On the inside. Don't let the 1/2 inch collar move. Tighten that star up and then check it again. And it should be able to go in there and drag just a little bit. And you should be able to let it go and it'll hold. Now I'm going to turn it until it does a full revolution. See it going down and coming back up. I'm going to put the pressure back on the exhaust valve and I'm going to check it again. I'm going to stick it in there and I'm going to let it hold. Now on the exhaust it calls for 5 thousandths, but you do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to find my 5 thousandths, that's 4 thousandths. Here we go. I'm going to spin it until the pressure's on this one and not on the exhaust. So I'm going to spin this back down. When the intake drops, there it goes. I know there's no pressure on my exhaust. I'm going to take my 5 thousandths. Hold on a second, I pulled out the wrong one. There it is. Pull out my 5 thousandths. I'm going to stick it in there, and it's very loose. If I let it go, it'll drop. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hold my 1/2 inch collar. I'm going to loosen the star nut that's on the inside. Uh-oh. That's bigger than a T20 for some reason. Alright, so let me get the next one up. Sometimes this stuff happens. Not a big deal. So find the one that fits for you. That one doesn't fit. Alright, I'm gonna have to pause after all. Well, how awesome was that? It was the right size. That star nut was moving, and I just didn't feel it moving with it. So I'm gonna take my 5 thousandths. I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to tighten the outer collar down until it starts to drag. I'm going to back it up just a tad. And I'm going to play with it until it will hold my feelers gauge, but until I can move it in and out with drag and it holds. Then I'm going to take my 1/2 inch. I'm going to hold the collar. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten that back up. That's it. Now I've got space. It's dragging. If I let it go, it holds. Now I'm going to turn it again. Make sure that it does a full revolution. When it comes back up, I'm going to put the pressure on the intake. Pressure's on the intake, which means it's not on the exhaust. I'm going to double check it again. I feel just a little bit of drag. And when I let it go, it'll hold. This side is now set. The valve lash is correct on this machine. This Kohler 22 horsepower. It's 5 thousandths and 7 thousandths. Do the same thing on the other side. If you have a twin like I do, I will be doing the same thing on this side. And that, my friends, is how you set valves. It's real easy, minimal tools. Don't be afraid to do it. Thanks for stopping by. Hit the like button. It's somewhere between my chin and my balls. Tune in for the entire project. We pulled the motor off of that 0 turn. We had to do some serious work on it, put it back together, and in the next video we're going to put it back on the machine, drive around and cut some grass. So thanks for stopping by. Hit the subscribe button. We'll see you soon. Okay, now I'm going to do the unthinkable before I go any further. I want to know if we got compression in both heads. So right now I've taken a battery. I don't have any jumper cables. I can't find them. And I've hooked the positive side of the battery to the positive terminal on the starter. And I have another wire here on the negative side. So when I touch it to ground, it'll make that starter spin. And when that starter spins, I have the spark plug in the other cylinder, and I have my compression gauge here set to 0. I'm going to spin it for a minute. And I'm going to see what kind of compression we have. And as long as we have 50 or 60 psi on this side, I'll be happy. All right, let's see what we got. You'll know before me. All right, we got 50 on this side. Now I'm okay with that. I don't know if you can see that. I'm okay with that for the moment. I'm going to see what the other side is. But considering the problems that we had with that cylinder, once this thing gets some oil in it, it is dead dry. Once it gets some oil in it and starts to work its way up, I believe the compression will even get a little bit better. So I'm going to pull the spark plug on this side. Oh no, he only put it in finger tight. Whatever will happen? Nothing. Nothing will happen. Not a huge deal. Just testing compression. Spark plug in this one. This is just a help hold compression. It shouldn't matter whether the spark plug's in or out on the opposite side, but when I test it, I like to put it in the opposite side. Now we're going to spin this in. And my compression gauge is an inexpensive one that I've had now for a couple of years. A subscriber sent to me. It's not always the most accurate, and I have found it's a little low sometimes. But we're back on 0. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to spin this thing again. Make sure if you're doing this, you don't do it for very long, and you hold the motor. You can see it vibrating and wobbling on the table. So make sure you find a place you can safely hold it and hold it. Now that ought to give me at least an idea of what's on this side. And remember, this side was untouched. Now see, I got 150 on this side, so that's not making me real happy. But we're still going to go ahead with the test. I think that will seat a little bit better, and I still think it'll run. So I guess we'll find out when we put it back together. All right, the next part's going to be boring. It's going to be me putting some parts back on this thing. I'm going to start by putting the intake back on. Now I've cleaned up the seat on the intake rail, and the old rubber O-rings seem to be in good shape and they're clean, so I'm going to put those back. Now on that compression test, I've been sitting here having a drink. It's about the end of the day for me. I got maybe half an hour left, 45 minutes. It's like 6:30. But I was sitting here taking a break, having a soda, and I was thinking about it, and I popped the compression test again. Now the cylinder is completely dry, which I should have at least put a little oil down in the cylinder or something like that, but I just wanted to spin it over again. This is a junk motor. We're trying to see if we can get some extended life out of it with minimal tools and minimal work. And when I tested it again, it was at 70 psi. Now that's still half of what the other cylinder was at 140 or 145. But when we get oil in this thing and it runs for 15 or 20 minutes, anything that may still be causing a ring to close up, any little bit of corrosion that's still left, will wear itself in. It will either wear it off the sleeve wall, or it will wear a small notch in the ring. Either way, those two will close up, and I will get better compression out of it after it runs for 15 or 20 minutes. So I'll check it again probably 30 minutes after I run it. After I install it and run it for 30 minutes, I'll pull the spark plug and check the compression again. And I have a sneaky suspicion that it's going to clear itself and gain some more compression. But anything over 65 PSI on this thing anyway is going to run that cylinder. Now obviously it's going to have a little bit of power loss. When you have low compression, you don't get quite the power out of this thing. But it is going to live. I know that much. And knowing that we have full compression on this side and only half on this side, I think that's going to get to about 3/4, maybe better. So we're going to put this thing back together, knowing completely that I'm just going to be playing with this myself. I'm going to be using this to cut a few lawns around the neighborhood. And if it blows up, so be it, because I have motors laying over there. Actually not laying, I don't keep them laying when they're in good shape. But I have motors over there with the same shaft size. This, if you're wondering, by the way, is a 1-inch diameter shaft, and it is approximately 3 inches long, give or take 1/8 of an inch. I don't know the factory spec length on it, but I do know that 1/8 of an inch does not make a huge difference when you're talking about the PTO clutch going on and that kind of thing. So as long as your shaft is the same diameter, it's not 7/8 of an inch, it's not 3/4 of an inch, it's not 1 1/4 inches, all of your PTO clutch, your pulleys, they'll all fit as long as the diameter is correct, and as long as the length is pretty dang close, your pulleys will all line up with their belts and you can swap motors. So that's the one good thing. I've got a couple of Kohler motors over there. I want to say they're a little bit smaller. I want to say that one of them is a 17 horse or an 18 horse. But I don't mind. I have one of them that's a single. It's not even a twin cylinder, it's just a single. And on these lightweight little tiny box store zeros, I have put singles, like 16 horse singles on these things, and they run just fine. I wouldn't go into business cutting grass for a living because it is a slightly undersized motor. It's designed with you know, a 22 horse, some of them even larger. But I know a guy that had one. Actually, I believe it was a Toro as well. He put a 16 horse on it and ran it for 2 years commercially, cutting 30-40 lawns a week until he could afford to buy a brand new one. He ended up buying a Kubota, but he ran the heck out of his. But this will be the boring part, the part you may not want to watch, that kind of thing. I'm trying to remember where everything goes and how it goes. See, the tins have to go on. So my memory on this isn't good. It's been a couple of days. I've got to get the tins. I've got to figure out where they go. So I'm just going to do what I do, and maybe I'll speed it up and let you watch. Or maybe I'll edit it out later. Alright, that one, spark plug, is going to go on that side. So I'm looking for the inner one. Should be this one here, right? Is that cord? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe. Maybe. That's going to be a bigger one. That's a 10, I believe. I believe you can fly. So that's going to have a bolt that goes there. That's going to have a bolt that goes there. That's going to have to be a bigger bolt. Don't do like me. Don't just pull stuff out and put it away, because then it'll take you a couple of hours to figure out where it all went. But I kind of like doing it this way. If I haven't fast forwarded this, I like doing it this way because it's like remembering a puzzle. And it's like putting a puzzle back together. And I like doing that. So sometimes I almost rather doing it this way and hope I get it right. Because it makes my brain work. Bigger boy. We're gonna get boogered by bigger boys. We're missing a plate. We're missing a plate. We're missing a plate. We're missing a plate. And I put it on the starter because I needed a spacer. I couldn't remember where the spacer was. So I used them as a spacer to hold the starter. There they are. There they are. Now, these are engine mounts so that you can hoist. Put that back there where it belongs. I gotta put the tin on the other side before I do that. We're not gonna tighten that. I'm just gonna put it there. Close? Or are we not close? Can't see anything. You guys are kind of in the way. Drop the motor. I want to move the motor. New screwdriver is what I need. me being lazy and not wanting to get a screwdriver. And I believe we're going to need one of these. Yes, these tins are very importante, muy importante, because they help move air around the fins. Air actually comes down from the blower on top of the machine, blows down across this, and these fins help divert the air where it needs to go. So they help keep it cool. So if you're putting one back together and you can't find the fins and you decide, well, it's not such a big deal, this thing can actually overheat without having these fins in place. Seems silly, but it really can. So try your best to get your tins back. Now, these, trying to remember, they actually go in those two spots, which means I got to take those bolts back out. That I just put in. This is what happens when you try doing it by memory. Sometimes you put stuff in, it has to come back out. And I'm okay with that. All I'm doing is using the screwdriver to bend the tin down so I can get the bolt started. This is your throttle plate, your throttle assembly plate. So there's no real settings per se on it. It just kind of gets put on there. It's going to go down where it needs to go. I put all of my parts in this bucket so I wouldn't lose them. I have those magnetic trays, but when you're pulling stuff apart and you don't have a shop where you have walls and boxes of parts, you end up taking a machine apart, figuring out what you need for it, ordering parts and waiting a few days before they arrive, and in the meantime you're pulling other machines apart. So I have several buckets of parts going at any given time for several machines that I'm working on. So I just tend to use buckets. If it's just screws and whatnot, you can use Tupperware, you know, you can use whatever. Now this would go on the governor, and there's a little lock plate. It's supposed to be in this bucket. There it is. This little lock plate goes in here from behind. And that goes in the little plastic piece. Locks on. And then my spring goes on. Which I need a pair of needle nose 4. And I'm too lazy to get up and get them. So I'm going to waste 5 minutes doing it this way until I finally go ahead and get up and get them. Because that's how I am. Stupid. And I put it on the wrong one, so back off. Let's try that again. This time. See, dude, the right tool for the right job. This would have been done and on had I just grabbed a pair of needle nose, but I didn't feel like it. So it is on where it's supposed to be. Now there's a couple of screws that go on here. And there's a spring that goes on the back. I'm going to do that later. Let me get some more tins on. I have pictures of that stuff, where the springs go. And it actually feels like something might be stuck on this governor linkage. Maybe not, but I'll check it after. Now the valves have been set. That's the main plug. I need Martins. I don't even know. Are you guys still even here? Yeah, you're still here. This one. Go like that. I need one of these. And I need that other L bracket. It probably fell on the ground. Awesome. There it is. Like that. There. Like that. And then that is going to meet up with that. Oh, that's what's stuck. That's what's stuck. That is supposed to be on the inside. On the inside. So let's take this side back up. I know it didn't feel correct. This wire is not supposed to be in there. Supposed to be out of there, and that is supposed to be on the inside of this. Why are you giving me so much goddamn trouble? Alright, take the other side off too. Jeebus. Alright, it still has to come up more. Because of course it does. So let's take the entire manifold off again. Because your dumbass didn't push the tin in. All of that for that. Now we put the damn manifold back on. course, it's not lined up. Come this way. Okay. Now that feels better. That's what was jammed. Okay. Don't forget that ground wire has to go there. Let's put this up here where that goes. There. Another one to go in there. There, that goes there. Should be another bolt under there. Should be right there. All this bullshit pretends. But it's gotta be done. I gotta put another 10 on this side. It has to go in there. This one has to go in here. This one has to go here. Still got to take out these bolts so I can put the exhaust on. Those bolts, by the way, are hex. They're old Allen key hex. And that exhaust is the main reason that I went ahead and took this off the machine. Because trying to get up under there to get to those, they're always rusted, they're always a mess. Was not something that I wanted to do. It was a pain in the butt getting them off from the bench position. Another one that goes there. I don't think it's a big one, I think it's a small one. I think that's the one. This went on. I think that's the one. That goes on. bolts are back in place. Bing, bang, boom, boom, boom. All the tins are back on. This is going to be a short, skinny one. Just to put this ground back where it belongs. It actually looks too big too. It is. Left is this long skinny one, so okay. This is the ground for the carburetor solenoid. Your fuel shut off, basically. Alright, that's on. Governor's moving correctly now. All this is on. I didn't take the carb off yet. I'm going to have to, most likely. Damn, that's not even a dual carb, man. That's just a regular old $20 replaceable carb. So that'll come off here. Gotta come off there. Hell, I might have to take that intake off again. I don't know. But for the moment, I got a couple of springs that go on. I took a bunch of pictures, but I'm using my phone to film. And one's even missing. Wonderful. Now, I don't remember where they go. This one goes in from behind. I don't know. I don't remember. So I'm going to kill you guys. Shut you off. Find my last spring. Get the pictures of this. And put this last couple things back on. Alright, well that's all there is to it. This one happens to be a 5/16. It may be different on your machine. And the two bolts that hold the carb assembly and all that, I believe, are a number 10. 10 millimeter. We's about to find out. Yep, 10 mil. Like I said, don't forget to put your breather hose back on. Your fuel line obviously goes right there. Your auto choke needs to get plugged in. And that's how you do it. Now all of our linkages are back on, our plastic's back on, smart choke's back on, all the gaskets are in place. It should be nothing but put some fuel in this sucker. Now I have to put my fuel pump back on it. Put the, what else do I have to do? I'm not putting the plastics on until after I make sure it's running right. The top cover anyway. So I think that's been adjusted. My magnetos are on and plugged in. I think all I have to do is take it off the jack stands, put my fuel pump back on, put some fuel in it, and finish putting the oil in it, and then it'll start. If you want to see that, tune into the video. It's a series called I Bought a $75 Zero Turn. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Hit the like and subscribe button. They're somewhere between my chin and my balls. And make sure you tell your friends if they like to watch videos like this. I appreciate it, and we'll see you soon. Okay, y'all been wanting to know about that $75 Zero Turn. I took the motor off the machine. I put it on the bench, cracked her apart, found rust in the piston and sleeve, sanded it by hand with sandpaper to show you whether it would work or not. Took off the auto choke, installed the choke cable. Let's see how she sounds. Give her some throttle. Woo-wee! So remember, kids, you might not have all the fancy tools that all the big shops have, but if you got a hand and some sandpaper and some common sense, you can bring a machine back to life. Okay, we should have our key back now. And if and we do, I'm actually going to test drive this. I got all the belts back on. So it should drive. I did test the wheels yesterday. Provided the belt stays on correctly, it should drive. I don't want to drive it too long because I don't have the top cowling on, which is what directs air over the cylinders. But here's hoping that we got her back. Well, I would say that's a win. I've been working on this thing for, I don't know, a couple, 3 days between waiting on parts. 2 carburetors because the, babe, Peanut, what's up, buddy? Because my little buddy, come here, buddy. My little buddy out back busted the carburetor on me. We have put a new choke cable in, ran that down. You see it's still long. I'm going to shorten that up. I may even make a little video on how to shorten those up and my little bender tool I got. I still have my temporary choke on there. I did go yesterday and find myself a piece of a choke cable that was about 1 foot long. That's more than enough, and choke cable is actually really thick, strong stuff. So I'm gonna cut that, put the bends in it, and make a permanent choke to go from my lever down below up to my butterfly. I'm gonna put the top back on it. I'm gonna call this a win. You see that it runs, it drives. When I originally got it, the motor was locked up. I pulled it off the machine, took it to the bench, pulled it apart, found rust in the cylinder, sanded it with 600 grit sandpaper by hand slowly. It took me, I don't know, an hour or so because I didn't want to take off any more material than I needed to. I did check the compression on it. I don't think I filmed that, but originally I had about 50 pounds of pressure, 50 psi in the cylinder that was rusted and 150 psi in the cylinder that wasn't. After I put it back on, bench tested it, put it back on the machine, tested it, let it run for about 10 minutes. I checked compression again, and we were up to 120 psi. So it did seat itself right back on. The damage is minimal. I would not go into business with this machine cutting 30, 40 lawns a week, but it's a box store machine, so you shouldn't do that anyway. They're not made for that. But she rides. Hashtag she rides. So if you made it this long, thank you for hanging out with me, working on another machine that was dead. bringing her back to life. I'm going to button this thing up. I'm actually going to cut the grass here. It hasn't rained in a few weeks, but the front yard does need to be cut. The deck sounded pretty good when I turned it on. You saw a bunch of dust and stuff come out the side. I was on that dead spot blowing sand around. Woo! Hi guys. Yeah, I live right next to an airport. The belts are in good shape. The spindles seem to be good. I'm going to check them for grease fittings. Most of the time, the box store spindles do not have grease fittings. I hear it in the comments already. Drill one and tap one in. No, not doing it. Spindle sets for these things are under $100. You can buy them individually for $30. If it does develop a problem down the road, we'll deal with that. But right now, it's a matter of buttoning a few more things up on it, put the cover on it, and I'm calling this thing a win. I am going to fix that ground cable, or as my buddies in the UK would call it, an earth cable. The end is messed up, so I'm going to put a new end on it, put it back on in place. Make sure everything else is tight, buttoned up, check the oil again. Just, you know, all the normal stuff, and then I'm going to play with this thing for a couple of weeks before I decide what I'm going to do with it. I was able to put tubes in the front tires, and they seem to be holding air just fine now. They would be replaced if I was going to be using this thing. It really is in good shape. It needs a good cleaning. I got to put that seat back together or get a new one, but she's back in businesses. So the whole thing, I paid $75 for it, sight unseen. The man that had it delivered it to me, and I handed him $75 before he even took it off his trailer. I'm not counting the 2 carburetors, because if you don't have a neighbor like mine, it wouldn't happen to you. I bought a carburetor for $30, so that's $105. It cost me $14 for the choke cable, so that's $120. $10 for oil, $130. I do have to change the oil again after a while and put in a new filter. But other than that, tubes were like $5 a piece at Harbor Freight for the 4-inch tubes. And a battery. It needed a battery, and I pulled one out of the shop, so that would have been another $30. So, you know, I got somewhere in the ballpark of $150, $175 into this thing in a couple of days, and I got a 0 turn that in my neck of the woods would sell for between $1,200 and $1,500. This is why I buy these things. This is why I bring them back to life. Where else can you make $1,000 piddling in your spare time in a week with a little bit of knowledge? Everything else turned out to be okay. Oh, I bought the gaskets. I had to buy head gaskets and valve cover gaskets and exhaust gaskets, and I think I bought the set for like $35. So like $175 I think I got into this thing. And she's ready to start cutting grass here in a few minutes when I button her up. So thanks for stopping by. I have no idea how many pieces I'm going to break this video up into, but I'm going to try a new editing process. If you're still with me and you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It's somewhere between my chin and my balls, and we will see you on the next project.